Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to our session, and thank you very much for being here. I see that we have quite a number of persons in with us already. If your colleagues need a gentle reminder, please send that out to them so that they can get onto Zoom before we get to full capacity. We will jump right in with our usual reminders before we get into the content. If Zoom does reach full capacity, people may be a little busy this Monday evening, you can always, your colleagues can always get the session on Facebook. We will be using the chat on both Facebook and on Zoom for any questions or comments that you have. Please continue to share ideas of things that you've done in your classroom, questions that you have, suggestions, ideas that you'd like to try out. That's very, very welcome. We will have an opportunity at the end if you would like to contribute in some way about something that we have discussed during the session. And just a reminder that we want everyone to be comfortable and feel welcomed. So this is a safe space for learning, for sharing, no blame, no judgments. All right, as always, we're encouraging additional reading. We will share a few links, but we're also encouraging you to do your own research as well. Now, today we are of course sharing, we are talking about a process that you know very, very well and that you may have been using in your class for some time. So today we want to see if it's possible for us to get a slightly different view or some additional ideas and tips that we can use to really revamp the way that we use the writing process. All right. You can get busy in the chat, introducing yourself, talking about whether you've used this writing process, how consistently, how it's been working for you, and so on. I'm sure your colleagues would love to hear about that. So what we will be doing is looking at the stages. We will not spend a lot of time on every single stage because that's pretty easy for you to find out, just a search online. I've actually put in a useful site that if the writing process is really new to you, that you can do some reading. And just open Google, the writing process, you will get articles upon articles that you can read about that process. We want to look at a few of the activities in a few of the stages that we really want to focus on. But very, very importantly, because we said we always want to build, on what we know from session to session, we will definitely be talking about how the writing workshop, how the writing traits, and how the writing process can all work together really, really well. All right. So look out for that. We will be making it explicit as well, but you may be able to make some connections that are not actually made during this session as well. It may spark some ideas for you. All right. What exactly is the writing process? It's essentially steps or methods for creating a text, for creating a finished product. Right? Now, there are some implications from that time is required. And as we know, our students, in terms of the time that they would need for writing, would differ from student to student. It also implies there's a structure, but writing is a very individual, personal activity. All right. And this little image up here, I really like it because, it's very correct. We teach the students, that this is a process and it almost seems that, there's one straight line from wanting to write to actually having a finished product. But in reality, this is what happens. This is what writers do. And we did say that we want to create a community of writers. We want students to gain mastery and fluency and ownership of their writing. This is what will really happen. So, maybe sharing that with them will help them see, there's no linear process here. It goes all over the place. Sometimes we will just want to throw out things and start all over again, and that's totally fine, right? Perhaps what we can do is introduce our students to writers, to published writers, and have the students ask these writers about their own processes, because everyone may have a particular process that works well for him or for her. Now, these writers could be local writers, regional writers, or even international writers. In fact, we do have some students and teachers who have published with the Early Learners Program Right to Read initiative, right? So you can always see whether you have any of those at your school. A lot of them are in secondary school now. So you may have one or two of those writers at your school or the teachers themselves, and find out about their process. You know, how did they get started? How did it move from the initial draft or even an idea in their heads to something that is published on paper? All right. You also have a few copies of those books at the primary level in your school library. So you can always check them out so you can find the names of those writers. What we want to do is always set a goal for writing for the students, right? Let them look forward to publishing it and sharing their writing, whether it's an online forum, you know, you set up a class wiki that they can post their completed text to and have their peers read and comment on it, or whether there's a school website or a school social media page that you want to share their writing to, or whether it's just something that you want to do for the class, the school community, does not matter, right? Now that final point there on our slide, the stages may overlap and recur for some writers, right? We're going back to the idea of writing being an individual activity. And so some students may be able to move faster, some students may need a little more time, some students may need a little more support, right? So as we said, they may move all over that process. So that's a nice graphic that really explains what the writing process is, right? And I'll give you a moment to just look at some of the things that we can do at each of those stages, right? And you will notice that some of them happen both at the pre-writing stage and at the drafting, revising stage, right? Some of those like audience and purpose. Notice audience is there because in the beginning you want to identify your audience, but then you want to review again whether your audience has been addressed well during your drafting, and you revise to ensure that they are. Look at editing, look at publishing. All right. So this is essentially the process. And even here we see that there may be some cycles within the cycle itself, right? We have another link that we put in here with some ideas and activities for each of the stages and what this whole process is about. Now, I want to spend a bit of time really talking about the pre-writing stage, right? That first statement there is not an if, it's not a maybe, it's not a might, okay? We're saying if we don't do this stage well, if we skip this stage, if we rush through this stage, the result will be poor writing, all right? Will be poor writing. We have some ideas for pre-writing. I try to find a link that would have some extra ideas, but we will have some that we'll be presenting here to you as well. Now, this stage really begins the process of generating the text, generating that final text. It may well be the longest stage in the writing process, especially if students are new to writing, students are still working their way up to skilled writing, or if they are not very eager writers, they're reluctant writers, right? Now, in the same way that you would have pre-reading activities to prepare the students to understand the ideas that they're going to read, to make connections, and to respond to the text, pre-writing has a specific purpose as well, right? You want to teach students that as they're building their mastery, their writing mastery, you want to teach them explicitly to answer certain questions. Now, some of these questions are, what am I writing about? Why am I writing about this? What's my purpose? Do I want to inform persons? Do I want to persuade them? Do I want to entertain them? Right? Or do I just want to record some ideas that I can go back and reflect on later? What do I already know about this topic? What do I still want to find out about this subject? How do I feel about this thing that I'm writing about, this topic, this idea, this event, this story? How do I feel about it? How do I want to present it? How do I want to present the information that I have or the story that I have? Who would I like to enjoy my writing? How would I want them to feel after they've read my piece? right? So you want them to be questioning themselves at this stage. Why? Because you're setting a purpose for the writing, you're setting a purpose and helping them generate their ideas, you're helping them determine their purpose, determine their audience, determine how they're going to organize this information, right? And you want them to see a link between those questions and those things that they're doing in the pre-writing stage. Now, quite a few persons, many persons in our Padlet, where we asked about the challenges that you have with writing, this point about students being unable to have ideas for writing in the first place, or even expand their ideas, or generate details and so on, that came up quite a few times. And this is really the stage where this ideas challenge can be addressed, right? Because if we're saying that this is a stage where ideas are generated, it means we'd have to take the time, right? If you find that students have nothing to write about, that's a clue that we need to go back to the stage or lengthen the stage quite a bit, right? Now, what can you do here? Let's just run through some ways that we can address this challenge of students not having ideas to write. Background knowledge is important. So if I ask you to write about the origin of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, because you saw a few tweets or headlines, are you able to write about it? Do you feel that you'd be able to do justice to that particular topic? Might be unlikely because you may not have a lot of background information about it, right? That means you have to get that background information. Now, how many of you are going to fly over to Russia or to Ukraine and start asking questions? Maybe one or two of you, but I will be over here Googling maybe, right? Watching some videos, reading some articles, going into the history and so on. So I will find that information that I need, right? It's not a good idea for me to go and experience it directly, but if I could, if it was safe, that would be the best experience, right? Second point, that students need to see old things or normal things or regular things in new ways, right? How do you make that happen? Something that is just everyday for us, we don't pay a lot of attention to it. But if we have other persons talking about that same thing from their perspective, suddenly it becomes interesting, right? So multiple perspectives are important. And those multiple perspectives can go beyond the classroom, right? It could be students in another class. It could be younger students, older students, students from another school, students from another district, students from another island in the OECS, or even students from another country, another continent completely, right? But multiple perspectives are gaining those multiple perspectives can help students to see things that are regular, normal in new ways, right? Another vital point is that if students can talk about it and they can have sustained conversations about something, then they will be able to record it, right? So discussions are really, really, really important. Just sitting in circles and talking about things, relaxing and just talking about things, right? Having different students in the class share their ideas, that will help students to generate their own ideas and their own perspectives that they want to write about, right? Start with the familiar, build up to the new, right? So what experiences do students already have? How can I add new experiences to that, either directly or vicariously, right? Are there places around the school that I can take the students and help them see nature in a new way? Can I take them to the river there or see it in a new way? If my students have never been to the south of the island, undeniably some gorgeous places down there. Can I organize a trip for us to go there? Can we decide what it is we're looking out for? How are we going to record some of our observations and how we're feeling and so on, and use that as a source of writing, right? If we can't get to some places, can we use the technology to help us get a glimpse of what it is, right? Find ideas that already exist, and it goes back to the idea of research. It also goes to things like, watching movies, reading other stories, reading material, right? Reading through our textbook to find out some additional information. That's one way of generating ideas. There's practically nothing new under the sun. It's all been done and said before, so it must be recorded somewhere. Let's go and find it, see if we agree with it, see if we want to change it in some way to make it a little more, ours. And finally, you want to use various forms of media, right? So you don't want your pre-writing activities to just be one thing. We read another story and then we're going to write. Yes, books are great, but there are also songs, there are poems, there are videos, there's audio, there's images. You bring in an image, you put it up on the screen, and you just have students talk about what they see. Have they ever been to a place like this? How do you think this person is feeling, etc. Right? Now, here's a suggestion for generating ideas as well. Have students record things that they would like to write about, all right? Stories that they would like to tell, topics or information that they would like to share with others, new ideas that they want to explore, they want to find out about something that they find fascinating, but they don't know a lot about it, right? When you have writing sessions now, they can always select from those ideas. And as you're going through the writing process, there's nothing to say that students have to finish the entire writing process with one text, okay? They may draft several pieces, right? Depending on the speed of writing, they may draft several pieces. And then when you're going on to revise it, they can select from those drafts one of those that they probably would like to revise. Now, of course, you may want to help students develop proficiency in a particular type of writing. So let's say descriptive writing or expository or persuasive, right? Remember that your focus is not the topic or the content that they're writing about. Allow students to choose what it is they want to write about. Now, you can have some prompts ready for students who may not have, they may not be able to make a choice. But if you know your students really well, you've done maybe some interest inventories, then it's possible for you to help them generate ideas. Because let's face it, do you really want to read 20 stories about a day at the beach? Be honest. Do you? Do you really? 20 stories a day at the beach. Because there are so many things that can happen at the beach, especially for students, right? So how about we focus on teaching them how to write and we let them choose what to write? Now, here's another point. We need to be aware of our own biases as teachers, right? Now, bias seems like a strong word, but it's just a word that says we have our own experiences, our own preferences. Now, think about your own characteristics. Think about your gender, your religion, your marital, parental, socioeconomic status. And ask yourself, how do these things influence what you think students should write about? Are there certain topics that you feel that you don't like personally, or that you like? You like to read certain stories or certain information, but you don't like others, or you don't think it's appropriate for students to write about, right? Maybe the kinds of things boys would like to write about, or the kind of things that teenagers would want to write about. Are we projecting those biases on our students? And is that one of the things that's crippling or limiting the way that they express themselves in writing, right? Now, I'm not saying it's a free for all, but I'm saying, aren't we trying to create writers? Do we tell James Patterson what he can write about and what he cannot write about? If he did not have the opportunity to do so, we would not be able to read some of the books that he's created now, right? He'd be probably writing about a day at the beach too. So do we want to give students topics to write about all the time, or do we want them to choose? We want to give a lot of choice in the classroom, and this is an excellent way of doing that. Keep in mind our own biases, have the students generate ideas that they want to develop in their own writing. Now, of course, you see this point down here? Planning cannot be overemphasized. To be able to do any of these things, you must have information about your students already. You must have those prompts ahead of time, questions that you can ask them to help them generate their ideas. Now, here's an example, right? So let's say you're teaching persuasive writing to your students. Here are some examples of pre-writing activities that you can focus on when you're looking at a specific type of writing. The first thing you want students to see is examples of this text in their everyday life, including their everyday life, right? And you want to use a variety of activities: listening, speaking, reading, writing, acting, right? So notice, you're teaching persuasion. Talk about a time, you know, in a small group, when you had to convince someone to see things your way. Listen to examples of great speeches or even not so great ones, right? Listen to speeches during election time. How great are they? What are they focused on? What are the strategies that the speakers are using? Observe the advertisements in the media. Observe video ads, audio ads like radio ads. Observe posters. What are the differences? What are the similarities? List some things that you feel very strongly about, whether it's a positive feeling or negative feeling. Dramatize a situation where you had to maintain your position, or dramatize a situation where you had to change someone's mind. Find information online that can support an idea and use at least 3 sources. So you can use online, you can use friends, families, people in the community, business persons. Now, isn't this a little bit like what students have to do for the SBA, you know, at the secondary level? Right. Complete a mind map or concept map or graphic organizer. These are some activities, varied, that you can do during the pre-writing stage. You don't have to choose from them. You can do all of them, because remember we said this stage is very involved. You want students to have as many ideas as possible. Nothing says that students have no ideas as, you know, picking up a class, materials from a class and noticing that everyone has started their story in the same way, organize it in the very same way, and giving it the very same closing, because clearly the teacher gave them the sentence to start with and the sentence to end with, right? So you can get yourself out of that cycle by planning pre-writing activities and ensuring, do I have a listening? Do I have a reading? Do I have writing? Do I have dramatizing? Do I have, you know, something that involves technology? Do I have something that involves the community? So imagine students going out and, you know, creating a survey that they're going to get information from their community, their school community or their home community on, and come back to use in the class. Isn't that teaching them in a real world manner how to employ persuasion, how to get evidence to support persuasive text that they're going to create? And remember that their text, of course, we're talking about writing here, but persuasion is not just in writing, right? It's also in speaking, right? It's in drawing even, right? So you want them to see how these things link to things that they have in the environment and to things that they actually do all the time. Now you notice here, when it comes to the traits, the writing traits, this pre-writing stage really focuses on ideas and voice. Right now you'll see this little purple text there. It will either be connecting the content back to the writing workshop or to the writing traits. All right. Now, so that's it for the pre-writing. Let's not say a lot. I think I've given you quite a bit that you can get started with. Now, you move on to the drafting stage. Remember that during the drafting stage, students are really working on getting the ideas down on paper. That's the writing or the work stage in the writing workshop, right? At this point, it's a rough draft, it's a first draft. They're only focusing on ideas. They're not worrying about, you know, errors that they're making, etc. Right? You are not worried about that either. You want to remind them that the planning that they did in the pre-writing stage, where they created their outline or they used a graphic organizer, whatever it is, or the notes, to use those notes to help them to get the ideas down on paper, right? And even here, you want to be explicit in your teaching. You want to show them exactly what it is they should do, options that they have as they're drafting. Now, your mini lesson could focus on, for instance, how to start with interesting topic sentences as you write, right? And here's another suggestion. As your students are drafting, because it's a process and they're going to be working on this piece over and over, maybe you can get them to use blank paper. It doesn't matter if their writing starts in town and it reach on top of the Mount Fortune by the time they're on the other side of the paper. Don't worry about that. They are drafting, right? So use blank paper so that they can leave space in between their lines, or if they're using the ruled paper, they can skip a line so that when they go back for revising and editing, they can use that space, right, to do their revising or to do their editing. We've put a link in the chat with a short lesson on drafting. You will find some interesting little points in there. All right. At the revision stage, remember that for students to be able to revise their first draft, they must be evaluating the first draft, right? And how are they evaluating it? They're evaluating it against the mentor text that you would have used to demonstrate what good writing looks like, right? So they will be asking themselves, how does this draft of mine look like a good piece of writing? What about it makes it a good piece of writing, right? This is where you can use peer support, but the conferencing with the teacher is also very, very, very important. Remember when we spoke about conferencing, we said it's not to correct anything, but it's a time for questioning the students, probing, making suggestions, getting them to choose how next they want to move with their writing. Now, the peer support is great because a peer can always read their first draft and give them some feedback and say, you know, I really like this, or this was exciting, but what did you mean by that? You know, or when you made this point in your essay, what are you trying to say? I don't think I understood what you were trying to say, right? At this stage, they're also focusing on ideas, how those ideas are developed, right? Do I need to reorder my text? You know, maybe I started with the wrong, maybe the way I organized the text, my strongest point in my argument was in the middle. Maybe I should either start with it or end with it. So should I move some paragraphs around? Should I move ideas around? Should I replace an idea? Should I remove it completely? Should I expand on one, right? Is my text flowing? So am I making good use of transitions? And as I'm looking at the particular type of text that I'm creating, is the structure correct? Do I have the correct text structure in there? You know, maybe I'm doing something that's supposed to be explaining a process. Do I have the correct order? And am I using the key words and phrases that will signal to the reader that I'm explaining a process? Now, at the revision stage, you're again looking at voice and ideas, but you're also looking at organization and word choice. So all of these areas are possible mini lessons that you can have with students, either as a whole class if they need it, or during small group conferencing or even one-on-one conferencing, right? For instance, can you imagine a mini lesson on teaching your students or demonstrating to students how to expand a sentence that is either too simple or too vague, or how to vary their story structure by using maybe flashbacks, or how to include an element of foreshadowing in their story, right? These are really the places where you can help students just add something to their story or to their essay or to whatever text they're creating to give it a higher quality, right? So these are some areas that explicit teaching can still happen, all right? Especially here, the transitions, reordering, replacing, deleting, expanding, and structure, all right? For editing and proofreading, what are some other things you would look at? Definitely sentence structure, right? Am I using the same type of sentences? Do I have run-ons and fragments? What about the grammatical errors? Do I have correct subject, verb agreement, and so on? What about the mechanics, the spelling and punctuation and capitalization, right? Now you can use pair editing or you can use other editing strategies. So what are some of those strategies? You can have students read out loud. Now, as a writer, generally when you write something, right, in your mind, that's the best piece of writing that was ever done in the history of writing, right? But leave it for 2 days and then come back. Just pray you haven't posted it yet anywhere for you to go and read it and wonder whether Massive South Cafe, but what was I doing when I wrote this thing, right? What was I thinking? How did I miss this? Leave that piece of writing for a day or two. Or if you're doing editing right away, read it out loud and read exactly what's on the page. It really helps you to see whether your ideas are flowing, whether things are written correctly, and so on, right? There's also something called backwards reading backwards. So if you want to assess spelling, the spelling of words, you start with the last word on the page and you read backwards, right? So you essentially just, your brain is just focused on each word. If you want to look at sentence structure and punctuation, capitalization, etc., you start with the last sentence, right? You read that last sentence. Is that a complete sentence? Do I have any errors in there? Do I need to put in a comma somewhere, etc.? And then when you want to read for flow and for coherence, then you start at the top. Now, generally, when you start reading at the top, your brain is just so preoccupied with the ideas and the information. And when you've written it, you know what it is you meant to say. So sometimes your brain is telling you it's there, but it's not there at all. All right, so these strategies can actually help your students as they're editing. Note that revisions may still be happening at this stage. As you're editing your sentences, for instance, you may realize because of the structure of the sentence, there was some ambiguity in the sentence, or there was some vagueness, or even my word choice could have been better. So revisions will still be happening. You will use your mini lessons either as a reminder or as additional instruction as well. And at this stage, you're really focusing on sentence fluency and conventions, although, as I said, the writer may touch on the other elements as well. We will be talking about this a little more in the next session, but train your students to assess their own writing by using checklists. And you want to use a checklist in student-friendly language, matching their level, right? So here are two examples. One that you can use at the primary level, one that you can use at the secondary level, all right? Notice the language is simple. You want, when you present this checklist, they're not a surprise to the students when they started writing, but you would prepare them for it. You'd let them know, okay, so we're going to use some checklists. All right, let's go through the checklist. Let's make sure we understand what each phrase means and how you can look at your text to analyze whether you have it or not, right? And it's okay if I don't have it yet. That's just a way of checking on myself so that I can go back and make the necessary corrections. All right. Publishing and sharing, the final stage, really important. Here are some things that you can do. Include multimedia, so include illustrations, include tables, graphs, diagrams, etc. Right? If students are using a word processing program, that's a nice lesson where you can teach them how to use the tools to insert pictures and diagrams and so on in the text, how to place it. And that really focuses on the +1 trait of presentation, as they're creating the text, what font sizes to use, when to use bold, when to use italics, etc. All right. You want, as part of that publishing and sharing, to make the text available for others to read, whether it's other students, whether it's the school community, their caregivers like their parents and so on. This actually is a great place for you to share students' published texts during parent conferencing, right? This is a great time to really help students, the parents, see how students are making progress in their writing, right? Now, generally our parent conference is a lot of one-on-one, but if you have a class, can the parents come in and listen to the students read things that they've written at the end of a unit, for instance? That is one way of celebrating the writing achievements of students. And you always want to have that celebration. Not all of us will publish and become a world-class author, whatever it is, but we can still celebrate our writing achievements in our smaller communities. All right. So let's just review quickly because our time is winding down. Let's just review quickly some of the stages, what the students will be focused on and what you as a teacher will be focused on. In that pre-writing stage, as students are exploring their ideas, you are also probing, you're encouraging, you're helping them to generate those ideas. As they're drafting, you are suggesting. As they're revising, you are questioning and you are coaching. I love those words because none of it says you are directing, right? You are questioning and you are coaching. As they publish and as they're sharing, you are part of that community responding. How do we integrate the three approaches that we've examined so far? Let's put it this way to make it simple. The writing workshop is a framework, a way that you can organize your time around writing. So a focused mini lesson, quality time for students to do their writing and for you to conference with students, and time for sharing and reflecting. The writing traits really helps students to focus on the quality of their writing. So it helps them to see that what they write and how they organize their text produces a high quality piece for a specific audience. The writing process is exactly what its name says. It's an idea of the steps that a writer would go through to produce their text. Notice how every step or every stage of the writing process is actually about evaluating, questioning, and assessing. What do I want to write and for whom? Are my ideas well developed and organized? Is my text structurally sound? Does the language make it easy to read and to understand? What do my readers think about my text? How do they feel about my text? That is from the pre-writing all the way to the publishing stage, right? And we have a really nice graphic here that can really help you see that at every stage of the writing process, there are particular traits that can be addressed, okay? Keeping in mind, again, we said that this process is recursive, that this process is really a cycle and that students can move from stage to stage. We will be, of course, discussing how we have students at different stages of writing, not just stages of writing development, but of the writing process as well. And in the next session, we'll be talking about how we can track these students' writing progress by differentiating, by accommodating, by using a writing portfolio that can capture their progress, and by looking at some of the tools that we've already mentioned, such as the checklist and the writing rubrics and so on. Okay, now, I'm just going back here for a minute. Ask yourself whether you are able to see the connection among these three approaches and see the workshop as a framework for your time, how you organize your time, the traits for kind of what the students will write and how they will write it, and the process for the steps that they will go through as they write. Okay. So we're actually under 40 minutes. Let me pat myself on the back. Good job. But I do want to hear from you as well. Have you been using the writing process? Have you been using it consistently? What are some of the challenges that you had? And was there anything in this session that gave you an idea of how you can tweak your own process a bit? You may even want to comment on this slide here and how you are able to see the connection, or whether you are able to see a connection among these three approaches. So let's hear from you. You are free to comment on anything that you like. Ideas to share, experiences to share. Once you raise your hand, we can unmute you. Okay, Miss Alexis.
Yes, good afternoon, Miss. Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to say that, like I mentioned in the chat, I actually used the reading backwards strategy today. And I think it's very effective because too many times we may teach our students how to write a simple sentence. For example, I am a boy, and they will read it because they have memorized it, but not necessarily because they know the words. So using the reading backwards strategy can actually determine whether they know the words, and it will let you know how to go about teaching from there on. I also want to say that I really like the example you gave, the editing checklist, writing editing checklist, something that you said. Yeah.
Yes.
I really like it because again, in my experience, our students, they always forget to put the punctuation marks. Some of them, they begin sentences with the lowercase letters. The spacing is incorrect, you know. So I believe that this checklist will really keep them in check. And yes, so as a reminder, a constant reminder, and perhaps after having used that checklist frequently, they will be able to write without even using that checklist. So I really appreciate that idea that you just provided us with.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. And you are correct. That's the whole idea of sharing the checklist so that students assess themselves. That's less of that's something that you will not have to be doing constantly, going around and marking things like punctuation. Once you know that students have learned this, we all need reminders. And once we have those reminders in a checklist, whether in our writing notebook on our desk, whatever the case may be, that students can access easily, then they're able to use this to train themselves, right? And not just in their own material, but maybe in their peers' text as well. And I really love that you made the connection between the reading and the writing, that students are reading the text. It's not about just memorizing, but it's ensuring that they actually are familiar with the words and how this helps you make a decision on what needs to be done for writing. I think your hand is up again, is it?
Yes, Miss. I think you kind of mentioned what I was about to say, which is that the editing checklist can also be very beneficial and effective for pet tutoring, where, you know, students can look at their friends' works and whatever, and it can lead to independence and less teacher reliance. Yes, that's what I wanted to.
Yes, yes. Now you can adjust the checklist. These are obviously advanced for students who can read, although once you go through it with the students a few times, and this is not going to take you very long, you know, it'll take you a minute or two once you keep going over this with the students, but you can do simpler checklists for the students at the lower grades, considering that what they will be learning, they're still at the early stages of writing, right? And what they're learning, maybe they're learning about capital letters at the beginning of a sentence, then that's what the editing is going to be for them, right? Maybe they learned about the sound of TH, the two sounds or the one sound. Maybe that can be their spelling, the editing for the spelling that they do, right? So you, of course, using your own judgment and your own experience, will adjust for the level of students that you have. Once they have learned a particular whether it's how to use the comma, how to use the semicolon correctly, let's say at the secondary level or the upper primary level, then that can be something that's added to the checklist. The checklist can also be co-created by you and your students, right? So that's another consideration as well. Thank you very much for sharing. Do we have any other contributions? I see we have some in the chat that, let's see. Yes. Someone, Miss Eugene said she found that she did not spend enough time on the pre-writing stage, and that's usually, we usually see evidence of that later on when our students, you know, and their writing product may not be as the quality as they themselves want, right? And Miss Anus also said that they should be using some sort of checklist from the lower grades. Thank you very much for those contributions. So as I mentioned, our next session, which will be on Wednesday, we will be looking at how we can track our students' writing progress, and we'll be looking at how we can do that using writing portfolios. Oh, there are some hands. Okay, thank you. Yes. Oh, we have two hands. Mrs. Mark.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to share on behalf of a teacher. They are doing it, so they don't want to, so I will share. I went to a grade 2 and a grade 3 classroom, and the teachers were doing the editing stage, and it was done so beautifully that both teachers, they had given students the symbol. For one teacher, for the capital letter, they were using 3 lines. They were using the upside down V to insert. And it was so well done that the students knew what to look for. So when they identified the error, there was one teacher who actually used a piece of paper for the spelling. So for the error, she actually had a small piece of paper right there. So it was very visible. And for me as a coach, I actually saw that the students knew what the process was. They knew the pre-writing, they knew the drafting stage, you know, and the teacher model, the students followed. And I did ask her whether the piece of writing she was using was her own, but it was actually a piece that they had drafted together, and together they were revising. So that was well done. I just wanted to share. So well done, teachers. Some teachers are doing some marvelous things in the classroom. So I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really glad you shared that, because that's an important point that I wanted to make during editing, that you can also teach your students, as Mrs. Max said, any editing marks that you are going to use, that as they're doing pair editing, they can use those marks to help their peers edit their work. And if you do have to edit a piece or edit with them, as you conference with them, they understand what those marks are. And it's really heartening that teachers, I know that you are working very hard and working very well, including those explicit types of instruction during the writing process. So hopefully, if any of those teachers are here, you can see how you can add something to the toolbox that you already have. That's wonderful. Thanks very much for sharing. Miss Alexis, please.
Yes, Miss. One last thing. I just wanted to lend my voice in encouraging all the teachers here to try using the writing process. I must admit that when I first joined the staff at my school, there was a deliberate effort in, you know, using the writing process and the writers workshop. And when I compare that time to now, I can see a big difference. Back then, Miss, the students were writing much better. Currently, we have a serious issue at our school with writing, with literacy on a whole. And I think it's partly because we have not really been using, or we have not really been making a deliberate effort in using the writing process as like we used to before. So yes, my encouragement to all teachers here is to, you know, use the writing process. It works.
Yes. And you know what? Maybe when we speak on Wednesday about how you can track your students' writing progress, because I suspect some of the times it's because we're not really actively looking at the progress students are making, we're not realizing the effect that our approaches may be having on the students. But consistency is key, right? So you may have started using it and things seem to be going well, and then, you know, we fall off from using those strategies. It happens to all of us, but consistency is key. But tracking progress as well helps us to see that a particular strategy is working, or there are some adjustments we need to make to our strategy so that it works better, right? I noticed a question on checklists. So next session, we will talk about some of those. They're very easy to find online. They're very easy for you to adapt as well. So I will try to get some that are at various grade levels. And people, there are checklists for everything. There can be a checklist for every stage of the writing process. There could be checklists for reading. There could be checklists for listening. There are checklists for almost everything, and you can create your own. And although the two that were on display on the slide here seem to be a little involved, you know, packed, you can create simple ones with 3 to 5 items here, okay? A comment, although mini lessons are done, students have trouble in applying everything done to their writing task. A mini lesson on story introduction may not be used. Right, now, do you recall that during the discussion on the writing workshop, we mentioned this, right? So when you're doing the mini lesson, you want to make it very explicit that they're going to use this, not just in this session, but every time they do writing. So it might be helpful for us to help them keep track of the things that they've learned to do, right? So remember, we learn how to write a great story introduction. Let's put this up on our chat so that we know this is one of the things we will keep doing all the time, right? Some students may get this from the first mini lesson, right? But based on how your students are responding, you may notice that some students need additional practice. And during your conferencing sessions, you may decide if it's a small group, you pull that small group together and you do additional mini lessons on how to go about doing that. See how well they're following, and the practice part of things is also important. When you're teaching writing, there are various things that we can do, and I want to talk about interactive writing in the next session, because that's one of the ways that you can support students who are still building their way up to skilled writing, right? Where you write with the students, or in some instances, you write for the students, but they are producing the ideas, right? But we'll talk about that in the next session. Thank you very, very much for all of your comments. Thank you for your participation. And just before you go, I want to just put up my little poll here. So if you are able to, please complete for me. While you're doing that, I am going to stop sharing, and I'm going to try to get the link to the shared folder with the materials from last session. So just give me a minute to do that before you leave. And once you have that, you'll have access to the materials from the last few sessions. Thank you very much. Okay, I see a question whether there were any materials in this session. We put some links in the chat. Oh, the poll disappeared. Oh dear. Let me see if I can relaunch it. Hopefully you will still. Relaunch. Oh, if I do that, it will clear all the results. Okay, don't worry about it, people. But thank you very much for sharing your feedback. The materials for this session, I will add to the shared folder. So you will get the links. There were a few links we put in, maybe 4 or 5. You will get them in the shared folder. Okay, thank you very much. Please let me know if you can access the folder. So you can always download and copy materials, but please don't delete anything, or nobody else will be able to get any materials in there. Thank you very much and have a good evening. See you all on Wednesday.